Welcome to Silver Vixen ASMR, or welcome back. Tonight's video will see me wrapping up my books I read in February. Think of our little visit as a catch-up session between two friends who just want to chat about what they've read lately, and it's my turn to speak. So I'm going to launch right into it with the first book that I read in February, which was Michael Ondaatje's Anil's Ghost. So I have mentioned Michael Ondaatje before. He wrote one of my absolute favorites, The English Patient, and I read that at university and just never really forgot it. So I was quite excited when I saw this copy of a different novel at my parents' house. So I will first read the synopsis and then basically chat a bit about the characters, because I find that whatever the genre, whatever the plot, a good book has good characters. So I like to focus on that. It's really where I draw my energy and my excitement for a book. In his first novel since The English Patient, Michael Ondaatje displays again the richness of imagery and the keen emotional surety that all the hallmarks of his writing. Hallmarks. Anil's Ghost transports us to Sri Lanka, a country steeped in centuries of tradition, now forced into the late 20th century by the ravages of the Civil War. Into this maelstrom steps Anil Tisera, a young woman born in Sri Lanka, educated in England and America, who returns to Sri Lanka as a forensic anthropologist sent by an international human rights group to investigate the organized murder campaigns engulfing the island. What follows is a story about love, about family, about identity, about the unknown enemy, about the quest to unlock the hidden past, a story propelled by a riveting mystery. So this story has at the center of it the character of Anil, and as it states in the synopsis, she has a homecoming of sorts to her home country of Sri Lanka, but it's not for anything very pleasant. In fact, it's a very uncomfortable return for her, and there is not a whole lot of pleasantness, because even though it's her home country, her parents have actually passed on. It's not really a spoiler because it doesn't really come into the story or her characterization all that much. But yes, she's just coming for work, and it's obviously something extremely unpleasant because there is a very violent political landscape that her country is embroiled within. So Anil, as a forensic anthropologist, is paired up with Sarath, and I can't quite remember what his job title is, but he is obviously also Sri Lankan but lives in the country. And so Anil, throughout the book, she can't quite tell where his loyalties lie, because in this violent political landscape there is the government, there are the official opposition to the government, and there's also guerrilla fighters. So we don't really know, and that's the whole point of Anil coming, who is behind all of this organized violence and murder. So she doesn't quite know, you know, if he's dispatched by the government, is he really wanting to find the truth, or is he, you know, going to try and quash her findings if the government is found to be at fault or found to be behind certain attacks. So it's a very uneasy relationship between the two characters that we see the most of in the story. Anil has Anil and Sarath together. They, very close to the beginning of the story, they discover a body, and quite quickly they can tell that it's not from many moons ago. It's somewhat recent, within the last year, that this body you know, became a corpse, if I can put it that way. And so with both of their experience and expertise, they have to study this body, and the interesting thing is that the body is found in a government site that can only be accessed if you have you know, a government pass or government connections. So to Anil, it's obviously very important to find out and to prove that this body is not from 100 years ago or a long time ago, because where it's found is actually it's a cave. Very, very ancient bodies were found there, and so she needs to prove when the body, as I said, became, you know, a corpse, when and you can see also that you have to prove what was the means of death. You know, was it by violence, was it by force, was it murder, you know. And so they actually have a few bodies. They name them, they give them different names, but this one, the key body that they are researching, they call Sailor. And it's just really quite fascinating, because in their journey they come across Sarath's old teacher, and they meet Sarath's brother, and they are also directed to this young man who is, you know, he lost his wife. He works in, I think they are gem mines. He works underground, and it's just terribly cramped conditions. He's a very unhappy person, but he has this skill of basically reconstructing faces, and they are directed to him to help reconstruct Sailor's face, because if they know what Sailor looked like, they can identify him. Who was this person? Where is he from? Who is he connected to? And so you know, I feel like I'm giving a little bit too much away, but the relationships between the characters are very, very much at the heart of the story, as well as Ondaatje's very clear love for the country. It's the country of his birth, though I think he's a Canadian national. As far as I know, he did move there. Maybe quite similarly to Emil, but I would have to research that. And yes, you know, it's so clear that Ondaatje loves the country, loves the land. It is described with such warmth and such authenticity, you know, some real feeling and care has gone into descriptions of these beautiful temples that we visit with Anil and Zarath, and it's quite lovely, and really engrosses you with the physical landscape. So yeah, lovely in terms of all of these visuals, but of course the themes and the content, it's quite a heavy novel. It's not the heaviest, but you know, the subject matter is obviously, it's political, it brings in violence, so you know, not too harrowing, but you know, an emotional read, and one that gets you thinking. So yeah, you know, more of a serious read. So that's what I'll say about Anil's Ghost. I don't like to give spoilers, so if you're interested, you know, absolutely go for it. Very mature reading, I'll put it that way. And then the next book that I read on Kindle. I'm much more a fan of the lovely hard copy, whether it's a soft cover or hard cover. I actually prefer soft covers to hard covers, but I do like a physical copy of a book. But as I said, I did read the next book on my Kindle, and it's kind of, I don't want to say embarrassing, but I was a little bit surprised because I had actually already read this book and completely forgotten that I'd read it. So if you have a Kindle, you'll know that once you read a book, it's marked as read in your library, and so it was marked as read, and I thought, but I haven't read that. I must have checked to see how many pages there were and forgot to, you know, click back to the beginning of the book. And then of course, as I was reading it, I was like, oh wait, this is familiar. Okay, maybe I read the first chapter. And then, oh wait, this, oh no, I know this mystery, I know what the, you know, I realized I definitely read it. It was not an error. So this was a reread, an accidental reread. I reread Dark Places by Gillian Flynn, and I don't think I can find a synopsis on my Kindle, but I will read a bit of praise before I get into the characters, of course. So this is only Flynn's second crime novel, and demonstrates even more forcibly her precocious writing ability and talent for the macabre. That was from the Daily Mail. And Dark Places is even better than the author's award-winning Sharp Objects. That was by The Guardian. I know Sharp Objects was made into either a series or a, what do you call it, like a mini series with Amy Adams, I believe, and I absolutely adore Amy Adams, so I would really love to read Sharp Objects in the future. Let's do one more. Gillian Flynn's writing is compulsively good. I would rather read her than just about any other crime writer, says Kate Atkinson. Okay, so really lovely praise. I have read her brilliant Gone Girl. I'm sure we all have at least heard of Gone Girl. You might have seen the film. I read the book quite a few years ago now, and I absolutely loved it. It was super gripping, and this, I think Gone Girl must have come out after this, since this was her second novel, and quite clearly Sharp Objects was her first. So just to give a little bit of the synopsis, of the backstory, this novel is about the aftermath, well, not just the aftermath, it is about the tragedy of and aftermath of the Day family massacre. So they were a little family, fatherless essentially, and it was the mother, Patty, three sisters, Michelle, Debbie and Libby, and their older brother, Ben. I mentioned Ben last because I want to deal with Ben first as a character. So Ben we see through flashbacks, and actually no, it doesn't make sense to start with Ben. Let me start with Libby, because it's, yes, we see him through flashbacks, but the flashbacks are put into context because of what Libby is going through. So Libby was the youngest of the sisters, the youngest of all the siblings, alright? And she is the only girl, she's the only female in the home that didn't survive. That did survive. Oh my goodness. I've read this book twice and I'm getting all jumbled. So Libby survives and Ben survives, but Ben survives because he is the killer, right? He is convicted. Libby, in fact, goes on she testifies during the trial, and her testimony puts him away because there, isn't direct evidence, and so he's convicted of killing the mother, Patty, their mother, Patty, Michelle, the eldest of the girls, and Debbie, who was the middle of the girls. And so the story picks up 20 years after the fact, and Libby actually, she's been living off of basically charity her whole life, because of course these kinds of horrible tragedies, they make the news everywhere and people will donate money. You're this poor little teen, I think she was 10, or was she 7? She was quite young, I think she was 7 or 8. And when she's 18 she comes into the money that was, donated to her, and she just lived off of it. She never got a job. you know, and I think that's partly from the trauma. But Libby is an extremely unpleasant, borderline distasteful character. It's made very clear by Libby herself that she's not a nice person, that she's not nice to or about other people. She is mean, that's the word that she uses. She's very mean, and it's something that it's very off-putting when you start reading the book. I personally, I do enjoy every now and then a good anti-hero story, but generally I would say about 80 to 90% of the time I prefer a character protagonist that I can relate to, that I like, you know, or at least I'm really easily compelled to empathize with. You know, it's why I read, you know, to kind of enter someone else's mind, someone else's life and experience and live, you know, get a little escape from my side and experience something a little bit different, and learn from it. So it's always a bit jarring to me to have a character that I don't really like as the protagonist, and so that was the case with this book. Libby has finally run out of money, and I think at this stage she is in her 30s. I think she's in her 30s, and now she's desperate for money. She's never worked, she doesn't have studies behind her, she doesn't have experience, and so her luck kind of comes through if I can say luck, comes through a letter in the post, and someone asks her to speak at this club where people are basically obsessed with serial killers, and they want her to speak about her family and what happened. And as soon as she gets there, they start asking her, you know, is she going to recant her testimony against Ben? And so basically what happens through the story is we start learning more and more what actually happened on that night. We intercut between Libby in the present day, where she's actually now trying to piece together what happened, and we are seeing what happened, but of course we get to see through the eyes of two of the characters, and she has to, you know, dig and search and find people. She looks for her father, she tries to find other people who were involved with Ben, friends with Ben, you know, who, you know, had dealings with him at that time, and she starts to put together a picture. And so she's getting sort of certain clues, and we are getting different clues from Patty, from the day and the night that it happened, and from Ben, the day and the night that it happened. And so the really fun part, oh, if I can say fun, that sounds a bit morbid, but the part that makes the book, you know, the part that makes the book, the part that makes you want to come back to the book again and again, is that you as the reader are trying to now reconcile what is Libby learning and what are we learning, and we can kind of see some possible links between, you know, over these gaps. and it's kind of like, are we going to figure out the truth before Libby, or are we going to figure it out with Libby? And it's just a very interesting way of structuring a story. I very much enjoy these types of mysteries because you know, it's not just like mystery thriller, you know, there's a lot more going on, a lot of very human themes. And you know, I will just briefly mention class is part of the is an important theme, and another I would say is parenting. So Ben, he's the eldest of the four, and you know, trying not to reveal too much, but he does have issues. He has serious self-esteem issues that run so deep that he makes poor decisions to try to prove himself, to other people. And I think that mostly what this stems from is, one, he doesn't have a father figure to kind of teach him as he's growing up what it is to be a man. You know, you don't just give in to peer pressure just because someone, you know, tells you if you do this then you're manly, you know. So he doesn't have a good male role model, which I think is important. It's important for both boys and girls to have both types, but certainly in the case of Ben, because of what his insecurities are, his lack of a father figure is a big issue, and is a catalyst for a lot of the stupid things that he does. But you know, it's not just the father who, you know, as I mentioned, is absent really, but the mother as well. You know, she was not prepared to be a parent. Neither of them were, and I think that has an absolute direct impact on how Ben turned out. So it's not a very happy story, even at the end. You know, when we get to the resolution, it's just one of those that when you leave the book you think, okay, well, that's done now, and let's try and find lighter days, greener pastures. So again, that's all I will say about that. And you know, if you do like mysteries, if you read Gone Girl and you enjoyed it, it's definitely not as good as Gone Girl, but it is, as I say, that kind of journey of, this is what Libby's finding out, this is what we're finding out. Somewhere in the middle is the full truth. If you enjoy that type of thing, you will enjoy Dark Places. And then our lovely last little bookie, definitely more in the realm of a novella. We have Collets, Ripening Seed. And Colette was a French writer. I did a teeny bit of research, and I believe that at the time that she wrote, she wasn't necessarily very popular, or she wasn't necessarily well praised. Not that she, you know, was not praised at all, but she wasn't really seen as very prolific or anything like that. And it was far more in her very later life and after her passing that people really came to put her into context of other writers, other French writers, and really appreciate what she offered, what she brought to the literary table. this book, Ripening Seed, I'm trying to see what year it was originally published, because that is a very important point for me. It was first published in 1923, and I want to know or remember, because I had checked this before, because this novel, or novella really, it's about 120 pages. This little, I'll call it a novella, is about two characters, Philippe and Vinka, and they are, I'll read the synopsis in a moment, but it's a boy, it's a girl, they are coming into their teenage years, they are in puberty, and they are very much in love, but the gender politics are very, very 1923, and so, you know, obviously this is a product of its time, so please, if you read this, be prepared for some nonsense, basically, in terms of how boys talk about, and to girls and women. It is somewhat infuriating as a modern woman that doesn't believe in strict gender roles and really believes that both masculine and feminine characteristics, they are conditioned, and they are not really masculine or feminine. We just are taught that they are. And so yes, it is slightly frustrating. So that is my sort of warning, if I can say. There's a lot that happens in the book in terms of, as I said, gender politics, the relationships between, I'll just say a boy and a girl because they're teenagers, but I wouldn't say they're adults, you know. But yeah, their interactions leave a lot to be desired from a modern person's point of view. But I will go back to 1923, and I will focus as much as I can on the work and on just the characterizations. How do they interact with each other? Because of course that's really what I focus on and what I enjoy and what I spend a lot of my post-reading ruminating about. So we have Philippe. Oh, I keep forgetting, I want to read the synopsis. Here is the simple story of Daphnis and Chloe brought up to date. It is the most atmospheric of Collette's novels, for the sea-coast scene haunts every page, as it does the lives of two young lovers who have visited it every year since childhood. The descriptions achieve their hypnotic effect by their precision and by the extraordinary variety of style disguised under what appears to be a flat surface of words. The action is concerned with three characters only: Philippe and Vinka, the boy and the girl, and Madame Dalaray, the beautiful woman of the world who, in teaching the boy that he is a man, gives him the key to happiness, and incidentally the key to Vinka. Phil and Vinka, harassed and innocent, are entangled in their childish quarrels, which are already developing into lovers' quarrels when the story opens. In the few weeks of their summer holiday, they see the death of their childhood, and learn the true significance of their new and uneasy feelings for each other. Collette's underlying theme in this beautifully developed situation is that where boys have to learn from experience, girls are endowed with instinctive powers of perception and wisdom. Okay, so even there in just that last line, I feel that we've moved beyond that kind of thinking, you know, that boys would do this and girls would do that. It's obviously an important aspect of this story, so, you know, I won't harp on about it too much, but essentially it gives quite a bit of the backstory. It gives quite a bit in the synopsis, so we know the scene. They're on holiday at the coast, and they've been going there every year since they were kids. Now I think Phil is 15 going on 16 and Vinka is 14 going on 15, and the thing I like the most about the book is the way that they kind of look at each other and what they see. Phil is often describing what Vinka looks like, but in a way that it's clear that he thinks she's not necessarily the most pretty girl or the most, you know, conventionally attractive, but he sees so much beauty in her. Like, he'll describe the color of her skin or her hair in like great detail, and it's interesting because what he's saying doesn't necessarily sound to me or any reader necessarily as beautiful, but it's clear that he thinks she's beautiful because he loves her. And Vinka, she sort of does the same, but her focus is much more on Philippe's attitude, his kind of demeanor towards her. She doesn't do a lot of describing of what he looks like. In fact, a lot of the story is focalized through Philippe. So at the beginning I thought that it was going to be a bit more even, but I realized that a lot is through his eyes, and of course that also makes sense because he is the character that has a relationship with Madame Dalaray. Vinka sees her once, but he visits with the lady in white. He calls her a few things. He really can't stop himself from returning time and time again to her, you know, little holiday home. And it's just interesting. It says, the woman of the world who, in teaching the boy that he is a man, gives him the key, da 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 da. And the thing is, there is very clearly a violation of a minor in this story. You know, she's a grown woman. She shouldn't be doing what she's doing with Philippe. And so it also, from that perspective, this would not fly, you know, as this would be seen as much more controversial in this day and age, and rightfully so. So, you know, I do feel that as much as there is that sweet kind of love between the two of them, it is very often overshadowed by his selfish actions, you know, things that are justified because he's a young man, and it's very old-fashioned thinking. And you know, she's just too emotional. She just feels too strongly, and she needs to trust Phil, and it again is very backwards thinking. And I wished I could have appreciated the book a little bit more. I did like the descriptions of the sea and of the coast, although I want to say traditionally, typically I am not a fan of long descriptions of any natural, I prefer to see myself. I love nature. I love being in the mountains or at the beach or in a park, but for some reason when I read it in a book, it drives me nuts. It just, more than, let's say 5 or 6 sentences, let's say per chapter, it's like I know where we are. I'm situated. I'm with you. That's just a personal thing. But this, I will say, was quite delightful. Maybe I miss the beach. I haven't been to the beach in a long time, so I would say that was my favorite part of it. The setting was really very enchanting, and so as a backdrop for a story about 2 young people that are trying to figure out how they can be together, moving from friends, childhood friends, to young adults that have a romantic love for each other, is it's a great backdrop for that. And so if you enjoy stories where coming of age stories, you might like this. As I say, it's quite old fashioned in its gender politics, so depending on your sensibilities, it might only be a minor flaw in your eyes, or frustration, should I say, because again, it's a product of its time. But if you're like me, it might be a real stumbling block to fully enjoying the narrative. Also, just another thing that made it quite a taxing read in a sense is the language, and of course this is a translation, so things get lost in translation, but their dialogue was so odd for a modern reader. Sometimes I just could not tell. I did not know what they were saying to each other, and maybe I would understand, like Phil would say something and I would know, okay, this is what he's saying. Then Vinka would respond and I wouldn't know, is she being sarcastic? Did she understand what he said? Did she misinterpret it, or did I misinterpret it? So yeah, the dialogue was very old-timey, and so there was also that element that made it a little bit difficult for me to connect. So good luck if you want to read it. It's always good to read something from the olden days, just to remind you to appreciate what we have now. So yeah, that's that. I really, really appreciate you visiting with me. It was such a pleasure to catch up, share with you what I've been reading. I know that there was a bit of delay since our last visit, so I hope that it was worth the wait, and we'll be sure to catch up about what I've read in March very soon, I guarantee it. I really do appreciate you spending your time with me. Thank you so much. I will see you very, very soon.